So how do flat earthers explain gravity? The spherical or the geoid shape of the Earth is caused by gravity like all planets. So goes the claim. First, it is ironic that only so-called fringe theories are expected to be able to explain everything down to the minutest detail, when in fact mainstream and the standard model of cosmology may declare 97% of the universe in principle inexplicable as well as scientifically inaccessible and still promote theirs as a success story. This is so bad that even a newborn flatty has a better chance to explain stuff than mainstream. That's for starters. Now let's go down to digging into the details. Nobody has yet shown how gravity works and what gravity is, physically speaking, other than pointing at things falling, like media darling Neil deGrasse Tyson dropping a microphone while exclaiming, "That's gravity for you." No, it's a falling microphone, and the science behind this is ironically all flat earth science. Pre-Newton experiments done by Bonaventura Cavalieri, 1598 to 1647, show that an object's fall time when dropped is always the same, no matter if it has an initial horizontal velocity or just drops dead down. This is only possible on a flat Earth. Would it be round and spinning, the cannonball dropped dead would land westward of Plum, and the range of a cannonball would be r equals vt, which would be equal to v times the square root of 2 times the height times g minus velocity squared over r, which it clearly isn't, although NASA employs this formula to generate the equation for quote world real velocity. Galileo also argued for the flat Earth with his claim that a ball dropped from the mast of a uniformly moving ship would land at the foot of the mast. Contrary to widespread belief, i.e. misinformation, Newton never investigated the physical phenomenon we call gravity, but misused the notion of an omnipresent and omnipotent force of nature from which there is no shielding for his theological agenda. Even when writing about optics, or in the foundational text of Western exact sciences, the Principia, he couldn't let go of preaching his catechism, a heretic anti-Trinitarian catechism, wherefore he had to hide it in pseudoscience that is Newtonian gravity. The most elegant system of the astronomical world could not have arisen without the design and domination of an intelligent and powerful being. He rules all things, not as the world's soul, but as Lord of all, and because of his dominion he is called Lord God Pantocrator. He's called Lord God Pantocrator. Fritz Zwicky in the 30s tested this Lord God Pantocrator by applying the law of universal gravity to the physics of galaxies. He realized that gravity is neither universal nor omnipresent or omnipotent, but beholden to the Newtonian church, a dark side of the Lord had to be invented in form of dark matter, and later even more mysterious dark energy had to be invoked in order to make ends meet. As all theologies are eventually misunderstood and misrepresented by the very followers and defenders of them, so it happened to theology. They emphasized that gravity, the immensity of the Lord in space, actually quite a powerful image, is not property of matter. So the battle cry of many Newtonians, where there is mass there is gravity, is actually not Newtonian at all, as he saw it as something space between matter is endowed with, and matter only reacts to the call of gravity, aka the Lord. The notion of force itself grew out of a theological discussion about how the Lord executes his will in physical terms, and because the Lord cannot be seen or appreciated other than by the effect he has, force as divine interference was also something that only could be appreciated by its effects. A equals F over m is nothing but an arbitrary definition that makes acceleration the visible effect of force applied onto mass, but it does not explain what a force actually is, physically speaking. And because of that, it does also not give us permission to claim this unknown something to be behind any and all accelerations, as that would be the same as saying, I define a cat to be a furry animal, and that gives me permission to claim any furry animal to be a cat. Gravity, as it turns out, is not a cat. That is, not a force, as gravity does not satisfy the criteria of a cat, that is, of a force. If a cat has whiskers, but so does a walrus. When you find an animal without whiskers, one thing is sure, it's not a cat. A force is measurable, and when you come across an acceleration that yields no measurement, you know one thing for sure, you can't make a force responsible for it. This is the case with free fall, which is dynamically indistinguishable from being stationary as in uniform velocity. Ironically, mainstream physics defines the absence of force in uniform motions by the lack of measurability, and at the same time defines the presence of force in free fall also by the lack of measurability. That's the kind of undigested inconsistencies flat earthers are usually accused of, yet mainstream physics is full of them. The greatest conundrum of the 20th century, the incompatibility of gravity with the other, quote, forces of nature, simply evaporates when you realize gravity is not a force to begin with. Objects do not resist to free fall, whereas they resist to being pushed. And this resistance to being pushed is the very definition of force in Newtonian mechanics. No resistance, no force. The mathematical form of gravity even left us with defines gravity as a surface feature. Nowhere is gravity greater than when two objects touch, as it is then that the distance between them centers at its minimum. And that means in the absence of another object, there is no weight, thus no compression. So they claimed the sphericity of Earth and planets has nothing to do with gravity. Nothing weighs into itself. That is an utterly silly and unphysical notion. Why would Earth weigh billions of pounds unto itself while only weighing 200 pounds unto you? All math that is presented to convey that idea is simply cheating and hoping you won't notice. Successfully so, I guess. Let's get out of the math lab for a moment and the reason in plain English. If you want to know the weight of Mount Everest, you have to first subtract its mass from the mass of the Earth and calculate a new value for little g. You could increase that volume to that of an entire continent, but always make sure to first subtract the mass of what you are weighing from the mass of Earth, because there are M1 and M2, and neither of these can include particles that are part of the other. So you go on increasing your chopping off and weighing until you have only your own body mass left. And what does Earth weigh then? Something around 900 newtons, not more. And once you include yourself with the Earth, its entire weight is gone. In terms of math, that means you cannot integrate g over r because g does not stack up. G equals f over m1 excludes m2, so people like t. You'll hear who claims that Earth is made up of so many masses which add up, and thus we are allowed to integrate. No, sorry to break it to you, mathematician, your Wonder One does not apply here. And that's something that gets mathematicians seriously bent out of shape. So the Earth cannot make itself round, and nowhere in the only observed feature of gravity, falling, is there a reason to believe things cannot fall onto a flat Earth. The fact that objects of different mass, in fact, fall parallel and in sync tells us that the Earth is flat and anchored as well as stationary. Gravity. So to put it simply, in terms from a flat earther, no one is disputing that things fall down. The measurement of the rate at which they fall is an empirical measurement of kinematics. We all understand the difference between kinematics and dynamics, and measurements of kinematics are model independent, right? They don't prove either model. We would dispute the cause of gravity, or rather big G. If we were to break it down, little g is kinematics, big G is dynamics. We're only disputing the dynamics. We would dispute the cause of big G as mass attracting mass. We replace that with an electrostatic downward bias, where the charge of Earth produces the downward gradient, gives it the direction of down, and then buoyancy, density, and viscosity sort the rest of it out. Mathematically, if we were to describe the rate at which things fall, we could do so by calling it the acceleration downward, little a, and you could derive it by just with the equation 2h over t squared, or 2 times the height at which an object is dropped over the time it takes to fall squared. And this is of course a simplified version of the equation with velocity at 0, so d equals v sub 0t plus 1/2 at squared. And we can solve that with multiple examples to get 9.8 meters per second squared. Right, so in a real world example, if an object is dropped from 10 meters and takes 1.43 seconds to fall, you can solve for a using the same equation. You say a equals 2 times 10 over 1.43 squared, or a equals 20 over 2.0449, or 9.78 meters per second. And that's how you get the empiric or kinematic measurement of the rate at which things fall. No mass attracting mass or Newtonian gravitation required.